Hi guys, welcome back to Z's Corner. This is Al. So I'm really excited because I just got out of a takeover like an hour ago where I got to test out my new mitigation officers of Gowron and Martok for the first time since I was able to max them in a real world scenario. So as if you can remember, we had talked about in one of my roadmaps that I want to do a video around these guys, and now I finally have the kind of the content that I wanted to really kind of go more in depth with what they're able to do. So we'll get to that in a bit, but before we start on that, I kind of want to correct a mistake that I made on my previous video. Thank you to Hugo for kind of pointing this out to me, but it looks like the Hope Reach proc is not a flat 80%. This is incorrect. What that does is it takes your total critical hit damage percent and multiplies that by 1.5. So it's really kind of like a 50% bonus as opposed to an 80% bonus. So I will be making some corrections on the calculator when I get a chance, and you guys can check that out again. And as a reminder, because a few people were asking me for links to the calculator, I actually post the links in the video description for that video. So please be sure to check the video description for the link, and you should be able to access it without any problem. We're going to do a quick refresher on what the officers are. So I've got kind of Gowron pulled up on the screen right now. And his captain ability is, I guess, kind of middling. It's nice to have, but it's not, the best or the most needed captain ability. Basically, the captain ability is to increase the ship's energy weapon by weapon damage by 50%. And as we were looking at the weapon damage calculation in the previous video, 50% overall is not a very significant type of increase. So it's kind of a nice to have. But really, what makes him such a good officer is his officer ability, right? So his officer ability directly increases the ship's shield deflection by 1% of the crew's total health. And if we look at how he tiers, basically at max he's 1400%. Now 1400% is not as good as a max attack officer like Marcus, who's at 1600%. But basically, you're negating that Marcus and you're knocking him down back to what he was at a tier 1 ability. And more importantly than that, when Gowron is at tier 3 or tier 4, tier 3 is at 800% bonus. And that directly counters a tier 4 Marcus. So Marcus takes a long time to get to 1600%, and even now a lot of people don't have a 1600% Marcus. Someone who has a tier 4 Marcus is already pretty good, and it wasn't really hard for you in the duality arc, at least at the event store last time, to have like a tier 3 Gowron. So that can directly counter Marcus at tier 4. So he's a very, very useful officer, and as you might expect, he's probably pretty good on explorers, because as folks are trying to target you and come at you with an anti-explorer type officer like Marcus, you can throw Gowron on your explorer and directly counter what he's trying to do. And remember, as you're doing this, you're kind of regaining the mitigation that you were losing because of your opponent's Marcus. So and what that means is you get dealt less shield damage and less hull damage eventually once your shields run out. So very, very good officer. And then Martok is kind of the same thing. Okay, so let's just click on Martok. Martok is basically the mitigation officer that counters Kane. And if we look at that again, he increases the ship's kinetic weapon damage by 50%. Nice to have, not really necessary to have him as captain though. His officer ability is basically, it mirrors what Gowron's is, except he increases dodge and not shield deflection. So he's an officer for you to put on your interceptors. And this directly, again, counters the attack officer, Kane, who, like Marcus, at max is 1600%. So basically, this is a very, very good counter. And I think I said knocking the Marcus back down to tier 1 just previously, and that's incorrect, because Marcus, I think, is 100% at tier 1 and 200% at tier 2s. All right, so let's jump into the game, and I made a video again with all the battle logs just so hopefully we won't have as many mic problems. But here you can see with my Corvus, I've got Kane captain, and when Kane is captain, his captain ability is 80% chance to deal hull breach to the opponent for the first 3 rounds of the fight, and then his officer ability, mine is max, is 1600% to accuracy on the ship, which again directly counters the dodge, which is the primary mitigation technique for the interceptor right here. And then I've got a tier 3 HG Wharf for critical hits, and I've got Gowron on as well, and my Gowron is max, so he's at 1400% to bonus to shield deflection, which more or less counters Marcus right here. And you'll notice that Baller's got what used to be the direct counter to my Corvus on his north cut, which he's got Yuki captain here with Marcus and HG Wharf as well. So Yuki, again, as a reminder, with the synergy from Marcus, she does negative 15% to my shields every single round, the beginning of each round. And then in addition to that, she has 500% bonus damage against Romulan ships. And then Marcus, of course, has the 1600% shield pierce bonus, and HG Wharf is critical hit, which I've already mentioned. Let's start playing the video and take a look at this. So you can see here Baller has a tier 3 HG Wharf, and I had just talked to all of these officers as well, so we won't go into too much detail. Let's look at the battle log real quick. You see right off the bat that all of my officers are proccing, including Khan with hull breach, and hull breach is critical here. And this is one of those critical hit type builds for the Corvus, and it allows me to deal significant amounts of damage, especially with hull breach on. So you see Baller's officers are proccing. You see right off the bat we're trading critical hits, and you see because of my hull breach proc, I'm dealing significant more damage than Baller is. I'm at 7.6 million, 7.7 million. He's only at 4.9 million, 4.86 million in critical hits. And then let's try and continue seeing how this plays out. I'm at again 8.2, 7.1. His bigger guns are firing now, so his damage is coming up. With his guns at 8.3, 7.5, 8.3. Let's call it 8.3. And then here, right below that, my big guns are firing. And you can see with my big guns firing, he gets destroyed because I've got so much damage here. 14.5 million, I guess. 14.5 million, 15.2 million critical hits. And you can see that he's all killed right here. Really quick, because after his shield's gone, he just doesn't have enough hull health to sustain that much because of his low mitigation, since I'm directly countering it with Kane. And as a reminder, let's look again at my mitigation, because I forgot to do that. So you can see he's doing basically 4.9 million in critical hit, yet I'm mitigating 2.2 million of that. That's not quite half, but it's a lot more than what he's doing with mine. Like, for example, 7 million, he's only mitigating 1.6 million. So that's kind of the huge difference maker Gowron is in this fight. Alright, so I wanted to show this battle log as well. The crews have not changed, yet what happened to the point where I almost die? I mean, I suffered maybe 80% hull damage in this one fight alone, and Baller wasn't even full health. And the difference here is basically that my Kane didn't proc. So I have an 80% chance for Kane to proc, and when he doesn't proc, I do a significantly less amount of damage. So remember before we were doing like 8 million damage on critical hits in round 1. Let's take a look at how much damage I'm going to do now with a look at the battle log real quick. So you see right here, my Kane does not proc, and because my Kane does not proc, I do a lot less damage. I also got unlucky with not getting critical hits, basically, as well. So less damage. And right here, I do get a critical hit. So remember before I was at 7.7, 7.8, 8 million damage, 8.2 million damage. I'm only doing 5.3 million critical hit damage. That's a significant reduction in critical hit damage. And this is kind of what happens when you don't have the hull breach crew, or you don't have hull breach in effect as well. My damage is basically on par with that of the North Cut. So let's see, and as we're looking in round 2, The only saving grace that I have here is basically I'm still mitigating a lot more than North Cut. So even though we're doing the same amount of damage, I'm gonna win anyway. But you'll notice that the fight goes out a lot longer. So he's hitting for 7-something million. I'm hitting him for 10-something million, whereas before I was hitting for like 18 million. In this case, I almost died, and it's totally because of breach not proccing correctly, or not proccing. It's just bad luck. All right, this fight is one of the only good ones that I had of me versus a anti-Romulan interceptor crew with Martok, with me having Martok in action. So, because this is like my third ship, I don't have the best crew on here. I've got a decent crew, so I've got Yuki here anyway. So again, Yuki kind of is the same as Yanag in terms of providing bonus damage against Romulan ships. In addition, she does 10% off of shields, and I've got a max con, so this kind of helps me with critical hits. And I have Martok for mitigation. So Ganano has as Kane as captain. So Kane as captain again, he has that chance to proc hull breach, a good chance to proc hull breach, and especially with Yanag here, he has a 90% chance to proc hull breach. And then Yanag does the plus 500% damage against Romulan ships. He's got again 1600% to accuracy, and then he's got HG Wharf because this is Ganano's first ship, so he's got a decent critical hit chance as well. So let's look at the battle log real quick here. So this is a pretty long fight because again, I don't have any way to deal breach with my current crew, and my mitigation is basically dragging this fight out. So you see his Kane procs. So the first 3 rounds are going to be pretty painful for me. I'm going to get pretty much out damaged, and let's look at that. So I'm not, because I don't have HG Wharf, I'm not doing that much critical hits. Look at his critical hits, 3.3 million here because of the Kane proc on breach. See, I'm only at 2.45 million crits, so that's a significant difference. Let's take a quick look at the mitigation in this battle. So if we look at here, I'm hitting Ganono for 2.5 million damage. He mitigates 1.47 million of that damage. And if you do the math on that, that's about 58%, a bit over 58% mitigation. Now, remember, this is because my Kane, which is the anti-interceptor officer, is on my Corvus, so I don't have him available. And who I do have, though, is like Martok. And with Martok, I get very close to Ganoto's mitigation. So you can see right here, he does 3.35 million damage to me. I mitigate 1.89 million damage. And if we do the math, that's around 56%. So I'm within 2% of what his mitigation is. So I'm basically completely countering Ganoto's Kane, or almost completely countering Ganoto's Kane. And after that, it's really more of kind of just slugging it out and, some lucky or unlucky procs in the random number generator to decide the outcome of the battle. Normally, I'd say, because I'm mitigating a bit less and Ganano's doing more damage up front, and he's got hull breach on, and I don't, that I would typically lose this battle, but I must have gotten, lucky on a few critical hits, and Ganoto must have gotten unlucky on some of his lack of critical hits for me able to kind of win out. But, overall, to take on the same tier, because Ganoto's got a tier 7 pylum, and I'm a tier 7 pylum with I'd say a 3rd tier crew for me, and to basically, be even against Ganoto's strongest crew, this is still an overall win-win for me. All right, in this fight, I really wanted to show because I was fighting a G4 Epic, and I know it was kind of damaged to begin with, but again, he's got the right crew, Yuki, Marcus, Khan, I guess, instead of HG Wharf, but still a pretty strong crew here, and it was basically scratching my paint on the Corvus here, and we'll take a quick look at the battle log on this one. See all my officer procking. Again, you see me doing the really big critical hits. And this is kind of crazy. Look at the damage difference between what I'm doing, 6.5 million, 6.7 million basically, versus Enterprise A without a critical hit at 800-something thousand damage. I know he hits a lot more in round 2, but still, his critical hit is only 2.2 million. I'm at 6.8, 7.4. So again, with the big guns firing here at over 14 million, the Enterprise A is pretty Oh, it survived. He actually survived for another round. Now, looking at the battle log, we see the officers are proccing. And if we continue to scroll down a bit, you'll notice that his Nova's Lorca did not proc in round 1, unfortunately for him. So his critical hit damage is going to be, even less than what mine is at. He's only at 1.5 million. I'm doing bigger critical hits than he is at 2.46 million. But the thing to know really is the mitigation here, because he's got Lorca, and I don't have Kane on my ship. He's got Lorca and Captain Tilly. If you do the math here, he's at over 60%, almost like 65% mitigation on his ship, and I don't have that much. He doesn't have Kane either. I have Martok, so in this case, if we do the math on my mitigation, it's only a little tiny bit better than what my mitigation was against Ganono. Against him, I was at 56%. Against Nova, I'm only at around 59%. So in this case, I'd say, Martok, because the opponent doesn't really have the attack officer, Martok provides a very slight bonus to me in this scenario. And if I had thrown on a secondary type mitigation officer, let's say with Bael or Gowron, but Gowron's on my Corvus. But if I had thrown on Bael, I might have had better results in terms of mitigation in this case, because Nova did not have Kane on his ship either. So anyway, if we keep looking, you can see we're kind of trading critical hits. He's got more critical hits than I do, because he's got HG Warf on there. I only have Con to kind of help with me, but basically Con by round 2 or 3 with a max Con, I'm going to do mostly critical hits. We've seen in round 2 that Nova's Lorca procs Hull Breach. So with Hull Breach, you'll see that he's going to jump from where he was at 1.38, 1.55 type critical hits, a million damage to over 2 right away. So it's definitely the Lorca crew is still a great crew to use. And in this case, I don't think I would necessarily have won against Nova if we had the same tier of pylons, because he's got more mitigation than me, and when Lorca procs with Hull Breach, he's doing consistent and pretty decent amount of damage in terms of critical hits, almost on par with my damage. So it's really a toss-up in this case. We're at the end of the video, so I hope you guys enjoyed looking at the battle logs today and the examples of the new mitigation officers of Gowron and Martok in action. And just to do a quick recap here, basically when your opponent is using an attack officer that's against your ship class and you've got the correct mitigation officer on, then you actually do much better in terms of mitigation. You can almost pull yourself back to where you were if your opponent had not used a direct attack officer. However, if your opponent did not use an attack officer, the benefit of having one of the new mitigation officers is pretty minimal, as we saw in the fight right here with Nova. So, kind of crew and think about how you want to do it. I think this is going to swing the PvP equation maybe a little bit more back in favor of, let's say, a general PvP crew. We'll have to kind of test out some of these theories in terms of how do we really counter the new mitigation officers. I think we got a really good clue here with Nova's crew, and we'll do some testing on it, and I will let you guys know. So anyway, if you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button, and if you have any other comments, feel free to leave it below, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks so much.